However, cases show that having these individuals incarcerated under life imprisonment actually give them a chance to recognize the wrongdoing and also to heal from the emotional wounds which might have possibly fueled their addiction, violent behavior, and criminal behavior. Statistics also show that many of these criminals, they come from disadvantaged backgrounds of unequal standing. They were given unequal opportunities, or they themselves could be a victim of violence since young. And rehabilitative measures have been taken by different states. Like in the United Kingdom, you can see that there's life imprisonment chosen instead of death penalty. In fact, we see that the crime rate are much lower than that in some of the US states, which actually still have the death penalty. Yeah. In fact, taking another person's life does not stop violence. This may sound very familiar. Some people say you just kill the person and the person will not be able to kill anymore. That is actually a contradiction in responding to murder by executing people. It's like, how can we tell people not to resort to the use of violence to resolve their issues and the problem when the state is resorting to killing people? There is this social service agency in California which works with surviving families of murder victims. And many of these victims, family members, surviving family members, they spoke out against the death penalty. Too many a times, the state assume that the aggrieved families actually suffer the death penalty. They assume. There were also cases whereby these families speak up and they want to testify and comment in court, but they were denied that possibility. Yeah. And it is also, sometimes I think society assumes that violence ends with execution. Of course, not the whole society, but there is a part of society that, yeah, you have to put this person to death in order to actually stop more people from killing or murdering. In fact, it does not, because having been in practice for some years, in Singapore, we don't get a lot of chance to actually work with such families, although I think there are quite a number of such families out there because of the lack of integrating such resources and such help by the state to these families. But there were a couple of cases, as we have seen, that in fact the violence does not stop at the execution. The ripples are actually wash over the families of the condemned, and also the governor, I would believe, and also the executioner, I would believe. Yeah, even as we dialogue with different people in the system, we work with the family members, we work with the advocates, we work with the prison system, prison officers who were actually seeing these inmates on death row day in and day out. If I were to quote one of the daughter of a homicide victim, she said, "The killers were apprehended and given life sentence, not capital punishment. I'm so appreciative that our family did not have the added burden of a death sentence. Not having a death penalty allowed me to grieve at my own pace, in my own time." I think coming back to my stand as a social worker, social workers need to be mindful of our dual responsibility to the individual and also to the broader society at large, and to seek to resolve these conflicts between the client interests and those of the broader society in a socially responsible manner. Why do I say socially responsible manner? Rather than being a deterrent to stop violent and serious crimes, capital punishment legitimizes the expansion of the cycle of violence. And if this actually expands the cycle of violence, it is actually not socially responsible. And by opposing to the death penalty, social workers seek socially responsible alternatives aimed at stopping this cycle of violence. in society. And I think that these alternatives must be something that we have to work on, instead of just using this death penalty as a blanket clause to punish. And there is also another critical principle of social work, is social justice. Earlier, either Silan or Ravi mentioned that many of such death penalty could have been applied on people who are of a more disadvantaged background, and they may be poor or oppressed, vulnerable, or mentally incapacitated. And I found that this to be true. And based on the fact of social workers needing to speak up for social justice, that is whereby we do not, in fact, the practice actually holds social workers responsible to engage in social and political action to prevent and eliminate the domination of individual or class. Yeah. And these values actually provide a further grounding for social workers to oppose capital punishment, especially when they are applied on people who are oppressed, and especially cases whereby the accused has not been represented by reasonably compensated attorneys. Like Ravi, I think he does a lot of pro bono. I mean, of course he has to charge some like fees, right? But you see, there are so many other, not only in Singapore but in other states. Yeah, it's like that they are not well represented, and nobody wants to take these cases. And this actually is a form of discrimination. And now even if we don't talk about homicidal cases, right? In Singapore, other than meting out death penalty on homicidal cases, we actually hang drug traffickers, right? We know, right? Yeah. And I do not deny that drug abuse has led to many broken lives and led to many devastated families wanting to help their drug abuse family member kick the cycle of abuse. And this anguish and pain could well be unimaginable. Of course, we also work with families whereby they need to help a member kick off that cycle. However, I think personal responsibility ought to be borne by both the drug traffickers and also the drug abusers. And in Singapore, right, we spend a lot of money and resources on rehabilitation for drug abusers. We keep them incarcerated, they come out, repeat again, they can go in and come out 7 times or even up to 9 times. A lot of money spent, a lot of time spent, and yet, why? The basis we are told is you must give them a chance to change. You must give them a chance to rehabilitate. Okay, so if based on that, then why don't we give a chance to the drug traffickers to change? Isn't this discrimination? And when I see such discrimination, I cannot stand it, because it is against the beliefs and the principles that I hold as a social worker. And you see, the state puts these drug traffickers to death and give no possibility for recourse. Yeah, and this discriminatory act needs to be challenged. So maybe by now you might be wondering why I am sort of giving a lecture on social work like that, like module 101 like that. Oh, social workers must this, must that. So now, it comes to the crux of my message for today. Some of us may know, I'm not sure, I think maybe not many. Our president, Mr. S.M. Narayan, he is a trained social worker. And he has been conferred the title of Fellow by the Singapore Association of Social Workers very recently, last year, April. And I would like to draw our president's attention to the social work practice principle and beliefs that I have just shared, and to remind him that the practice of capital punishment is at variance with the fundamental values which we embrace as a social worker, whereby we have uphold preserving that dignity and that worth, inherent worth in this person.